So, why do people commit crimes? It's a question that seems so simple on the surface, but the answers, well, they're anything but. It's really easy to just jump to conclusions, right? To think about it as just a bad choice or some kind of moral failing. But what if the story is so much bigger than that? In this explainer, we're going to dive in and take a look at the really complex world of sociological criminology. Okay, to get us started, let's just use a really simple scenario. Picture this. It's late at night, and a teenager throws a rock and smashes a shop window. The first question that pops into your head is, why? Why'd they do that? And the answer you come up with actually reveals a whole lot about how you see the world. We're going to keep coming back to this teenager, so keep them in mind. You can really look at this in two totally different ways. On one hand, you could see it as a clear-cut case of an individual moral failure. A bad kid just making a bad choice. Simple as that. But on the other hand, you can zoom way out and start looking for a bigger picture, one that includes their neighborhood, their opportunities, and the very systems they live inside. And that's exactly what we're going to focus on.
To really understand the act, we have to first understand the world that person lives in. And this brings us to our first huge concept, the role of the environment.
This is something called strain theory. And honestly, it's pretty intuitive. Think of it like this. Society basically tells all of us to aim for success. Get a good job, a nice house, earn respect. But what happens when the normal paths to get there, things like good schools or decent jobs, are just blocked for some people? Well, that massive gap between the goal and the way to get there creates this immense pressure. Criminologists call that strain. So let's apply this to our teenager with a broken window. Maybe they live in a neighborhood with schools that are totally underfunded and there are just no jobs to be found. These blocked opportunities, well, they lead to that social strain we were talking about, a feeling of frustration, of being completely left out of the system. And that strain can just bubble over until it results in an act like smashing a window. It's not just a random act of violence, it's a symptom of something much deeper. And there's another piece to this environmental puzzle, social learning theory. The idea here is that behavior, and that means both good and bad behavior, is something we learn from the people and the world right around us. So, if a young person is surrounded by friends or family who respond to that social strain with crime, well, that behavior can start to feel normal. It can be learned. Okay, so we've looked at the why behind the act, but the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. Now we need to look at what happens next, the consequences of how we respond to it. And this brings us to the incredible power of a label. This brings us to labeling theory, and this idea is absolutely fascinating. The core of it is that being deviant isn't just about what a person does. It's also about how society, and especially powerful institutions like the justice system, reacts to what they did. When someone is officially slapped with a label like delinquent or criminal, that label can literally change how they see themselves and how the rest of the world sees them too. Let's go right back to our teenager. They get arrested for smashing that window. Now they're not just a kid who made a mistake anymore. Nope, they get processed by the system and are officially labeled a delinquent. And here is the really crucial part. The teenager might start to actually see themselves as that label. It can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, pushing them further down a criminal path simply because that's what everyone now expects of them. So let's pause for a second, just to see how these two big ideas fit together. Strain theory, that helps us understand the initial pressures that might have led to the act in the first place, the why. But labeling theory, that one focuses on what happens after the act, the consequences of how we all respond. Both are absolutely critical parts of this bigger picture. All right, now we're going to zoom out even further. We've talked about the pressures from the environment and the reactions from society, but who gets to decide what is even considered a crime to begin with? This brings us to our third section. Who writes the rules? This statement right here, it's simple, but it is incredibly powerful, and it gets right to the heart of our next concept. It forces us to ask a really tough question. Are laws actually neutral, or do they mostly just reflect the interest and values of the people who have power? This is where conflict theory comes in. It suggests that society isn't this one big, happy family where everyone agrees. Instead, it's more like an arena of competing groups, all with different amounts of power. And from this point of view, laws aren't just about simple right and wrong. They are actually tools used by the dominant groups to protect their own interests and to keep society running on their terms. So, who holds this power to define what a crime is? Well, conflict theory points to some of the biggest structures in our society. The very definitions of what's criminal and how harshly those crimes are punished are often shaped by the dynamics of race, class, gender, and the power that our major institutions hold. This view asks us to take a hard look and question whether the justice system is really treating everyone the same. I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds very theoretical, very academic, right? But it has huge, real world consequences, especially for people working in law enforcement. And that brings us to our final section, the new ethical toolkit. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've got all this sociological insight. So what? For a police officer out on the street in the middle of a tense situation, how does understanding strain theory, or labeling theory, or conflict theory actually change how they do their job? Well, it changes pretty much everything. An officer who gets these bigger dynamics is just better equipped to use their discretion fairly. They can apply policy more responsibly because they understand the potential impact on people and communities. They can lead with a much deeper awareness of the social context. And crucially, they can acknowledge the very real disparities that we know exist in the system. And this is really the ultimate takeaway here. Being a true ethical professional isn't just about following the rules in the book. It demands a deeper, more socially conscious understanding of the world. It means you need both legal compliance and sociological insight, and they have to work together, hand in hand. So we'll end on this thought. To see the teenager who smashed that window not just as another offender to be processed, but as a person living within a really complex social world, that's the first step. Because truly ethical action doesn't just come from a rule book, it comes from understanding. And that right there changes everything.